Demon's Brew by S.P.Dorning. Everybody knows the rain will put out your eyes if you don't wear protection. Funny what goes through your mind as you're sliding towards the edge of the polyglass roof of a 40-story mini-scraper. Those wise words from my friend Bacon were the only thing I could think of as my eyes burned and the storm poured out its wrath on the city. Bacon wasn't his real name. His real name was Oscar Mendleton, but he hated that. I called him Bacon because one night we got tired of all the synthetic food we were constantly eating and decided to go uptown. We spent a fortune on that meal and didn't like a whole lot of what got served, but Oscar discovered one thing he just couldn't get enough of. It was a delicacy called bacon, and it was served in strips. I bet he ate 2 pounds of the stuff before asking our waiter what it was made of. I bet those 2 pounds didn't taste the same the second time around. I'll have to remember to ask him if I live through this. I'd been hired by Jinx Lightfingers to make a simple pickup on the roof of the Del Chase Casino. Seemed like an easy job. I should have known better from the amount of creds he was offering. But when your stomach's growling and the rent's due, you don't look too closely at the gift horse that gallops up to the door. By the time I arrived at the place at the appointed time, the weather had turned, and suddenly there was a deluge of polluted rainwater coming down in buckets. Still, I didn't have any trouble finding the package that was wrapped in black, waterproof plastic. It had been right where Jinx said it would be, and that had been when the Omnibot had showed up. Of all the nights I could have picked to be fighting an Omnibot on the roof of the Del Chase, tonight wouldn't have been one of them. The leather from my synth coat was drying the polyglass enough that I wasn't hurtling towards the edge at breakneck speed, but I was still moving on. I'm sure that if there was such a thing as a casual observer, that it looked as if I calmly reached out and caught myself on the Infonet relay poles that stuck up like that one hair on Charlie the barkeep's bald head. I ignored the stinging burn of the rain on my lips as I kissed the polyglass lightly and gripped the relay with a white-knuckled hand. I reached in my jacket for the blaster that I kept in my shoulder rig under my left arm. The rig was empty. Somehow the blaster had worked loose during the fight. There was no telling where it was now. The piercing scream of the Omnibot froze my blood as it managed to untangle itself from the remains of the solar array that it had slid into. It was framed by a flash of lightning as it leaped towards the edge of the concrete where the roof and the polyglass joined. The Omnibot was a mixture of magic, science, and psychology. It had originally started out as a household servant. At least that's how it was marketed. It was just a robot drone, really, built to do what the regs were too lazy to do. The gimmick was that it had a personality crystal built in. They claimed that no two are the same. I still wonder how they could prove that. Then one of the black wizards from the lower south side had decided to make an expendable assassin out of one. I don't know exactly how they are created. There are rumors that they have to attach the soul of a murdered victim to the robot. As it screamed at me from the concrete side of the roof, I could see how those rumors had come about. The Omnibot screamed again and began to pace back and forth at the edge of the glass. It seemed to know that the glass might not hold its weight if it tried to come after me. It only made about 2 runs along the edge before deciding to risk it. I could hear the polyglass creak as it stepped out towards me. My stomach turned to ice as I saw a crack splinter out from under its foot. I looked down through the polyglass to see a 4-story drop with nothing between me and the dance floor below. The cracking sound multiplied, and I looked up in horror to see the Omnibot advancing another step. At that moment, Bacon stepped out from the shadows of the building behind it. He must have followed me up to the roof when I didn't come right back down. He was aiming my blaster at the back of the thing's head. My pal Bacon. My pal Bacon is a lot of things, but a marksman isn't one of them. Thing is, he knew it. That was why he kept edging closer. "It's okay, Dan, I got him," he said to reassure me, but the shout faded out to a barely audible whisper at the end. At the first sound of his voice, the Omnibot had been in motion. Its head whipped around, turning completely backwards to face him. Its left arm extended back towards him, and a long shaft of metal shot from its palm to impale Bacon through his stomach. The blaster fired harmlessly at the floor and ricocheted off into the night. "No!" I screamed, and the words seemed to have been embedded with razor blades the way it ripped out of my throat as it came out. Bacon looked down uncomprehendingly at the shaft of metal connecting him with the Omnibot. He gasped at it and grasped at it feebly with his left hand and slid down into a pile on the roof. At the sound of my voice, the Omnibot refocused its attention on me. I reached inside my jacket and pulled out the small package that I had been hired to pick up. It was the only thing I could think of that the monster might be after. This what you're after? Is this what you want? His head seemed to follow the movement of the package. That thing had just killed Bacon for this. There was no way I was going to let it have it. Fetch, boy, I yelled and threw it over the edge behind me. Its visor-covered eyes looked from me to the ledge and again, back and back again, uncomprehendingly. Then a slow growl began to build. In 3 short leaps it reached me, and I felt its vice-like grip clamp down around my throat. Polyglass popped and crackled like fireworks at the end of the year celebration as it lifted me off the roof with its one hand. I knew I was finished. My time was up. With my last bit of strength, I slammed the heel of my right hand down on its visor-covered eyes. The visor shattered, cutting my hand to ribbons and blinding the Omnibot momentarily. It stumbled sideways and lowered me down just enough for me to get my feet under me. I launched myself towards the monster, overbalancing it and falling on top of it. There was a few more pops and crackles as we rolled around on the top of the already overstressed glass. With a screech, the polyglass plate that we had been torturing turned loose from its moorings. There was a moment of weightlessness as I reached out to the edge of the concrete roof and grabbed the cable that ran along its edge to connect the relay pole with my left hand. Then gravity grabbed us and yanked us downward. The Omnibot grabbed me around the waist as we fell. I could feel its metal claws puncturing skin as it latched onto me to keep it from falling, and the added weight pulled my left shoulder out of socket as it tore a scream from my already tortured throat. When the blackness that had been hovering around the edge of my sight receded, I looked down at the face of the Omnibot that clutched me. Through the shattered remains of its visor, I could see what looked like an organic human eye. In the one brief moment that I looked into its eye, I saw something there. At that moment, all the programming from the control crystals became useless, and it knew it was going to die. All the add-ons and splicing and grafting slipped away, and what was left was something that, at one time, used to be human. It blinked once, slowly, and then pushed away. I watched it glint in the rain of polluted water and plexiglass as it fell onto the floor of the Dell Chase. The throb of my tortured shoulder made me gasp and jerk my attention back to the immediate concern, staying alive. There was no way I could climb back up to the roof. My left arm was dislocated, and my right hand had been cut to ribbons by the Omnibot's visor. As I hung there, thinking about letting go, I felt someone grip my wrist from above. I looked up to see an angel, literally. The man who grasped my wrist was dressed in some kind of metal armor. A helmet covered his head, but I could see most of his face through the visor. He smiled at me as he gripped my arm. "It's okay. I'm a friend," he said. "My name is Andil." As he lifted me to the safety of the roof, I could feel the warmth emanating from his grip and spreading through my body. Now, I've seen plenty of angels walking around the streets, counterfeit angels, young kids that have had grafted wings, or had wings grafted onto them just for looks. And some of them made out of metal, some classic dove wings, some of them even had leathery demon wings, but this guy didn't fit the profile. For one thing, he was old. You couldn't tell it from his face or his skin, but you could see it in his eyes. Another thing was the wings. They were magnificent, and they weren't just for looks. "I'm sorry you had to be in the way of this," he said. I knew they would have a tail on this, and I needed a decoy. He opened the package he had been holding, the same package I had tossed over the edge of the roof. I would have been quicker to help, but I couldn't let this fall into the wrong hands. It's taken me too long to track it down. It was a sphere of what appeared to be glass, but inside it was a glowing blue liquid. There was only a little of the liquid left, probably just enough to fill one of Charlie's shot glasses. "So that little squirt of liquid is worth more than my life? More than Bacon's life?" I almost stepped back as Andil's piercing gaze fell on me. Almost, but I gritted my teeth and stood my ground. Yes, I'm afraid so. I know how you must feel, but this, he bounced the glass sphere in his palm once, is beyond your understanding right now. So you hired Jinx to hire me to pick up the package. Humankind has no need for this. It is a demon's brew that can only bring pain and suffering. You should see to your friend. I hurriedly turned around and squatted beside Bacon as he let out a weak groan. There was a neat hole in his shirt, and it was soaked through with blood, but there was no wound on his stomach. There was only a circle of new skin on his belly where the hole should have been. As I thought about it, I realized my shoulder had stopped hurting, and there wasn't even a scar on my right hand. Did you do? I began, turning back to Andiel, but the rooftop was empty. Andiel was gone. Who are you talking to, Dan? Bacon asked weakly. Nobody, I answered after a moment's silence, unsure if I'd imagined the angel or not. Nobody. Thought I told you to never touch my gun, I said playfully, punched him on the shoulder. I just thought you might want it, he mumbled, and passed out. The rain stopped, and I expected the police to be there at any minute, but just for that 1 minute, it was peaceful.